Years after the death of Jam Master Jay, one-third of the legendary hip-hop trio Run-DMC, a jury has found two men guilty of his murder.
Two men found guilty of murder in the killing of Run-DMC's Jam Master Jay. Jurors found Carl Jordan Jr., Jay's godson, and Ronald Washington, Jay's childhood friend, guilty on all counts.
On October 30th, 2002, Jason Mizell, also known as Jam Master Jay of the legendary hip-hop group Run-DMC, was murdered in cold blood in his recording studio in Queens, New York. Now, it's taken more than 20 years, but today, a jury in this courthouse found Carl Jordan Jr. and Ronald Washington guilty of murder.
February 2024, a Queens courtroom finally shook the world of hip-hop with a verdict fans had been waiting more than 20 years for. Two men were convicted for the cold-blooded slaying of Jam Master Jay, the Run-DMC icon who was gunned down in his own studio back in 2002.
And I'm Candace Gibson, both men standing trial for the 2002 murder of the Run-DMC superstar, found guilty on all charges.
For 22 years, Queens lived in silence. Fear kept people quiet while wild rumors spread like wildfire. Street politics, heavy drug ties, and even links to the infamous shooting of a young 50 Cent, who had been blasted 9 times just months before Jay's homicide. So what really went down inside that studio? To even scratch the surface, we gotta rewind to the night hip-hop lost one of its greatest, when Jam Master Jay was silenced and the truth was buried with him. The names tied to this crime stunned the courtroom just as much as the guilty verdict itself. Carl Jordan Jr., Jay's very own godson, now 40 years old, and Ronald Washington, 59, a longtime friend who had been crashing at Jay's sister's place at the time. When the judge read the decision, chaos broke out. Washington exploded at the jury, yelling, "You all just ended 2 innocent people." Jordan's supporters cursed from the gallery, but Jordan himself stayed cool, turned around and told them, "I love you all." Nearly 22 years after that brazen studio hit, the silence finally cracked wide open. But this wasn't just about closing some dusty old case file. This verdict ripped the lid off a story that reached way beyond one man's passing.
Means taking the life of the man known as Jam Master Jay. His real name, Jason Mizell, one of the founders of the groundbreaking rap group Run-DMC.
Jam Master Jay wasn't only the legendary DJ who helped put Run-DMC on the global map, he was the gatekeeper who opened the first real door for a hungry Queens rapper named 50 Cent, giving him his very first shot in the booth and shaping the raw sound that would soon dominate the entire world. Jay wasn't just spinning turntables, he was building futures. He taught a young 50 Cent how to lay down tracks, how to count bars, how to flip his pain into hits. Long before the world heard Get Rich or Die Trying, it was Jam Master Jay showing a kid from South Jamaica how to turn struggle into music that would change the game forever. In the months leading up to Jay's shocking homicide, his young protege 50 Cent was already living through a nightmare. Sprayed with 9 bullets in broad daylight in a hit that almost ended him right there on the block.
Jam Master Jay was working in a recording studio here in Jamaica. He and a 25-year-old male Hispanic were relaxing in a lounge near the studio when a man walked into the studio, gun drawn, and opened fire. Mizell was struck once in the head and...
From that day forward, the streets couldn't stop buzzing. Were the two shootings tied together? Was there a deadly thread running from the 50s near...
The questions focus on witnesses and security cameras. The studio where Jay was shot is outfitted with several security cameras, but did they capture the killer?
Fast forward to 2024, when the guilty verdict finally dropped, 50's reaction was ice cold. On Instagram, he didn't write paragraphs or pour his heart out. Instead, he just posted a screenshot of the headline with the caption, "Welp, that's all, folks. R.I.P. Jam Master Jay," and threw in a shrug emoji. No tears, no long tribute, just a blunt farewell that said everything without saying much at all. The world had its convictions, but the why, those whispers of Queen Street politics and the dark shadows linking Jay's slaying to the young rapper he once called family, dragged everyone back to that rainy October night in 2002. It was a Wednesday evening in Queens, the rain turning Merrick Boulevard into a slick mirror glowing under the streetlights. Inside Jam Master Jay's 24/7 studio, everything felt calm, almost too calm. Jay was kicked back on the couch, controller in hand, locked into a video game with his boy Uriel Tony Rincon. Across the room, his business manager, Lydia High, was shuffling through paperwork. To them, it felt safe.
The killer passed a total of 4 security cameras on the way to the murder, at the door, up the stairs, and in the hallway leading to the studio, pulled a .40 caliber gun, put on a ski mask, and knocked over a woman as he opened the door. He then fired 3 shots, killing Mizell and injuring 25-year-old Ureko Rincon.
Like a regular night. But outside, danger was already creeping in. Through the fire escape, someone slipped in without a sound, later identified as Jay Bryant. He unlocked the studio door, then vanished back into the shadows, leaving the trap wide open. Moments later, Jay's godson, Carl Jordan Jr., and old friend Ronald Washington climbed the stairs. Jordan stepped inside first. Jay's face lit up, that genuine smile reserved for family. They shared a quick handshake, and then it turned deadly. In a split second, Jordan pulled a gun and aimed it right at Jay. "Oh!" Jay barely managed to speak before the first shot exploded at point-blank range. The bullet struck his head, dropping him instantly. Another shot tore into Rincon's leg, leaving him bleeding and stunned. Washington then turned his gun on Lydia High and barked for her to hit the floor. She froze, face pressed down, terrified to even breathe. Rincon, writhing in pain, later refused to give police anything useful. The code of the street still locked him up. And just like that, the 2 gunmen vanished into the night as quickly as they came, leaving behind nothing but blood, silence, and a legend gone forever. Security cameras? Completely useless. 4 of them sat inside the studio, yet not a single frame gave detectives anything to work with. And even though the building was only a 3-minute walk from the 103rd precinct, not one scrap of outside video ever surfaced. One of the only outside clues came from Tanya Edwards, a receptionist working nearby. She swore she saw a woman in a floppy brown hat leading a man in a velour tracksuit toward the studio around the same time of the shooting. At first, Tanya was convinced it was Jay's business manager, Lydia High, but years later, even she admitted she wasn't sure. The whole thing was over in seconds. A cold execution carried out not by masked strangers off the block, but by people Jay trusted with his life. When the news of Jam Master Jay's homicide spread through Queens, it was like a bomb going off. But inside that studio, fear spoke louder than any police siren. The only 2 people who could have told the full story, Lydia High and Uriel Tony Rincon, barely said a word. They weren't just shaken, they were terrified. This wasn't random drive-by violence. They knew exactly who pulled those triggers. Just like the still unsolved slayers of Tupac and Biggie, Jay's ending quickly got buried under rumors, street gossip, and endless conspiracy theories. But the truth was both simpler. Prosecutors would later confirm what most in Queens had already been whispering. The witnesses knew the shooters, and they kept their mouths shut because they feared deadly retaliation if they spoke. That fear? It came straight from the street code. Everybody knew the saying, snitches get stitches. And in a case this high profile, opening your mouth could mean ending up in the same grave as Jay. At first, both Lydia and Rincon lied to police, watering down their accounts and leaving out the names they knew by heart. Rincon didn't finally break until 2017, nearly 15 years later, when he came clean and pointed to Carl Jordan Jr. as the triggerman. By then, it felt technology had failed. The 4 studio cameras offered nothing. Footage was missing, and some cameras had been mysteriously shut down. To Jay's brother Randy Allen, the answer was obvious. This wasn't just a setup, this was an inside job. Fear, loyalty, and betrayal froze Jam Master Jay's case for decades.
Jason was an amazing talent. He loved everybody. He could never say no, Will, because he just didn't push people away. He loved everybody, and he just couldn't say no. And I think that this contributed to this where we're at today.
Back in the 1980s. But years later, his fame was fading, and the money was running out, so he turned to crafting, according to prosecutors.
It took broken alliances and rare moments of bravery from new witnesses before the truth even started to surface. But in Queens, when people stayed quiet, the streets filled the silence with whispers. Barbershops, bodegas, and street corners stayed buzzing about one theory that refused to die: that Jay's homicide was tied to Queens' most feared drug boss, Kenneth Supreme McGriff, and the growing tension around Jay's protege, 50 Cent. McGriff wasn't just another neighborhood hustler. He was the kingpin of the Supreme Team, the crew that ran Queens' drug game in the 80s and 90s with iron fists and fear.
Mizell had also been selling cocaine, and in August of 2002, he received 10 kilograms on consignment to sell in the Maryland area.
Even into the 2000s, his name carried the kind of weight that made people lower their voices when they said it. And this is where things got deadly. Years earlier, 50 had dropped the track Ghetto Koran, where he basically put the borough's street operations on blast. McGriff did not take that lightly. Then in May 2000, 50 was ambushed outside his grandmother's house, sprayed with 9 bullets in broad daylight, one of the most infamous attempts on a rapper's life. Plenty of people believed Kenneth Supreme McGriff was the mastermind behind that near-fatal hit on 50 Cent. And even though 50 survived, that shooting branded him with an invisible blacklist across the music industry. Executives didn't want the drama, so they cut him off. But Jam Master Jay, he wasn't built to fold. Despite the pressure, he kept 50 close, letting him record in his studio when everyone else was too scared to even pick up his calls. Federal investigators would later ask the bone-chilling question, did Jay's loyalty seal his fate? Was standing by 50 Cent the fatal move that cost him his life? The rumors only grew darker. Word on the street was that Murder Inc., the label allegedly using threats and intimidation to keep 50 locked out of the industry. But the story never fully stuck. McGriff himself brushed it off, saying he didn't even know 50 personally.
See, you can holler at me if you with me. So there's a bridge area almost on the record. And I learned to do those different things under Jay's tutelage. So, he's definitely been influential in my...
He admitted he'd heard of Jay, but claimed they had never once crossed paths. Eventually, those allegations faded from official government records, and police confirmed it wasn't their main lead anymore. Still, the stain remained. McGriff's name stayed branded to the legend, stamped as another shadowy layer in a case already drowned in silence. And Kenneth Supreme McGriff wasn't the only name flying around Queens. With no solid answers for years, every wild rumor found believers. Some swore it all came down to money, pointing the finger at Jay's own business partner, Randy Allen. Word on the block was that he'd taken out a $500,000 Keyman life insurance policy and had Jay slayed just to cash in. Police dug into it but came up empty. No proof at all. Others claimed it was old grudges coming back, like Curtis Schoon, a one-time associate in Queen's drug game, who was accused of putting a price on Jay's head over a debt. But Schoon shut that down quick, saying Jay had already paid him off years earlier, and investigators never tied him to anything. Then came the rumors so wild, they sounded more like tabloid gossip than a homicide case. One of the craziest? That Jam Master Jay's wife, Terry, was secretly having an affair with none other than Kenneth Supreme McGriff. But that story fell apart the second anyone looked closer. At that exact time, McGriff was under tight federal surveillance, and there wasn't a shred of evidence that such a relationship ever existed. The real nightmare for detectives wasn't just separating fact from fiction. It was that every rumor dragged in a new cast of enemies, shady alliances, and possible motives. The streets never stopped buzzing, but nobody dared to talk. With so many names getting tossed into the mix, the truth about who actually stepped into 24/7 studio that night, and why, stayed buried under years of silence and fear. For decades, this web of gossip, finger-pointing, and in place. But underneath all the talk of beef, debts, and industry politics was a much deeper story. One that started long before that rainy October night in Queens. To really understand why Jam Master Jay died, you first have to understand the life he lived. Jason Mizell, the man the world came to know as Jam Master Jay, was born on January 21, 1965 in Brooklyn before being raised in Hollis, Queens. By the early 80s, he had turned himself into the turntable wizard who powered Run-DMC alongside Joseph Run Simmons and Daryl DMC McDaniels. But Run-DMC didn't just drop records, they flipped the whole culture upside down. They became hip-hop's first true breakout superstars, the first rap group to go gold, the first to go platinum, the first to get videos spinning on MTV, and the first to storm the stage on American Bandstand. Their 1986 classic Raising Hell went multi-platinum with anthems like It's Tricky and It's Like That, plus their groundbreaking collaboration with Aerosmith on Walk This Way. That track didn't just top the charts, it smashed through barriers, pulling rap into rock arenas and blasting hip-hop into the pop mainstream forever. Run-DMC weren't just superstars, they were street heroes. They hit the stage with gold chains and Adidas, but they also hit the community with powerful anti-drug messages, PSA campaigns, and songs that told kids to steer clear of gang life. Their clean-cut image made them more than rap icons. They became role models not just in hip-hop, but in every neighborhood that claimed them. By the time they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2009, and later received the very first Grammy, Jam Master Jay's legacy was carved in stone forever. But behind the bright lights and applause, Jay's reality was far more complicated. The world saw him as a pioneer, mentor, and community leader, but privately he was drowning in struggles few could imagine. And it wasn't the wild rumors or beefs that pulled him into danger. It was the quiet battles with money, pressure, and survival that eventually tied him back to the streets and gave motive to his homicide. By the late 90s, the roar of the crowds was fading. Run-DMC, once untouchable, was sliding into decline. The shows got smaller, the checks got lighter, and hip-hop was moving into a new era without them. For Jay, a man who had once stood at the center of the culture's biggest stage, the math just wasn't adding up anymore. He tried to pivot, pushing JMJ Records, the label he launched in 1989. It birthed Onyx, one of the rawest rap groups of the era, and later introduced a hungry Queens rapper named 50 Cent. But the industry had shifted, and the label wasn't bringing in enough to keep up with Jay's lives carried a lot. By the early 2000s, Jay was buried under nearly $500,000 in IRS back taxes, interest, and penalties. Yet, even with his own finances crumbling, he never stopped giving. He paid cousins' college tuition, helped his mother, supported his wife and kids, even covered his sister's mortgage. Jay's generosity was legendary. No matter how deep his own troubles ran, he always made sure the people around him were good. But every yes he gave came with a cost. Behind the public's vision of a clean, anti-drug pioneer stood a man crushed by debt and running out of options. It wasn't petty feuds, industry politics, or random street beef that set him up for tragedy. It was the suffocating pressure of bills, taxes, and loyalty pulling him toward one desperate decision. And that one move tied him back into the same run by the very men later accused of taking his life. The harsh truth? The IRS didn't care about platinum plaques, and unpaid bills didn't respect legacy. With debts piling higher than the trophies on his shelf and music checks drying up, Jay was scrambling to keep it all afloat: the house, his family, and the long list of friends who leaned on him for help. According to prosecutors and courtroom testimony, that's when Jay quietly slid into a role nobody ever expected: the middleman. He wasn't out there hustling on corners or running some flashy cartel. This was more like a side hustle, a survival play. He started arranging on, just enough to patch the gap between what he owed and what little he was earning. At first it was small, controlled, and manageable. But then came Uncle. That was Jay's secret code name for his supplier, a man who turned out to be none other than Terry Southwest T. Flannery, co-founder of the infamous Black Mafia family. And in the drug world, Southwest T wasn't just a plug, he was a unicorn. A supplier with unlimited reach, endless resources, and a reputation that made even the hardest hustlers sit up straight. With Uncle in the picture, Jay's side hustle went into overdrive. More product, bigger deals, more cash. But with all that came the shadows: danger, rivalries, and partners who never forgot a debt and never forgave a slight. Jay had already been walking a thin line before, but now that line had turned razor sharp, and every step could cut deep. Still, Jay's life wasn't just tied to the streets. His real passion stayed in the booth. Back in 1996, when most of the music industry brushed off Curtis 50 Cent Jackson as just another rough-edged kid from Queens, Jay saw something different: a diamond waiting to shine. He didn't just sign 50 to JMJ Records, he took him in like family, guiding him bar by bar. In the studio, Jay drilled him on the craft: how to build hooks that stuck in people's heads, how to structure songs so they smacked from the very first line. Jay taught me about choruses, about counting bars with a metronome, 50 later recalled in a BET interview. He made me think about songs, not just rhymes. DJ Clark Kent never forgot the confidence in Jay's voice when he said, "This kid's going to be huge." Tony Yayo backed it up too, saying Jay was the one who truly gave 50 his first real shot. Jay made it his mission to lift 50 above the street politics and gangster energy that followed him everywhere. The tragedy is that Jay never lived to see what came next: the smash hit albums, the sold-out tours, the movies, the global empire. And after his homicide, that very bond with 50 Cent became fuel for one of the loudest theories. The night before the tragedy, it was nothing but love inside 24/7 studio. October 29th, 2002. Jay couldn't stop smiling, couldn't stop talking about the huge news. After years of grinding, 50 had finally sealed his deal with Dr. Dre and Eminem. Jay's cousin Stephen Watford remembered it clearly. He was so happy about 50 Cent getting signed to Dr. Director. We laughed, we cried. It meant so much to him. That night, the studio felt like a victory party. They stayed late, swapping battle stories, laughing about the Milwaukee trip they'd taken to celebrate the shady record signing. Jay floated around the room like a proud coach on championship night, clapping backs, replaying memories, soaking in the moment. But just 24 hours later, the same studio was a graveyard of silence. The laughter and joy from the night before still hung in the air like ghosts. The final echoes of a bond Jay had poured his heart into, a success he'd never lived to see fully bloom. And for years after, the whispers all seemed to point in the same direction. It felt almost too easy to believe Jay was ended because he stood side by side with 50 Cent, even when half the industry treated 50 like bad luck and crossed the street just to avoid him. Back in 2000, 50 had already survived an ambush outside his grandmother's house. Sprayed with 9 bullets in a hit many believed was tied to his track Ghetto Koran, a song that some said exposed Queen's underworld secrets. The word around the borough was that the hit was payback, and soon after another rumor spread through the industry, whispers of an invisible blacklist, quietly warning record labels to steer clear of him. Names like Murder Inc. and Kenneth Supreme McGriff were constantly swirling around those whispers, adding gasoline to the fire. But Jam Master Jay never flinched. He kept his doors wide open for 50, kept his name tied to him even when everyone else acted like the connection was career suicide. To some, that kind of loyalty looked reckless. To others, it looked like a death wish. To investigators and fans, it silenced Jay for defying the so-called blacklist. But the truth? It turned out to be smaller, messier, and deadlier than any rap beef or industry rumor. This wasn't about hip-hop politics, Murder Inc., or even Supreme McGriff. It all came down to 10 kilos of illicit product and a broken trust. In August 2002, Jay had taken nearly $200,000 worth on consignment, destined for Maryland. To move it, he brought in Ronald Washington and his godson, Carl Jordan Jr. But the plan blew up when another dealer, Ralph Yachty Mulgrave, refused to work with Washington because of old bad blood. So Jay made the call. Washington and Jordan were cut out of the deal. And that cut wasn't just financial. To them, it was personal. It was betrayal. And in the shadow world Jay had stepped into, betrayal demanded blood. Prosecutors later painted it as nothing short of a cold-blooded crime, fueled by greed and revenge. Witnesses, some finally breaking their silence nearly 20 years later, testified that Washington stood guard at the door with a gun, while Jordan walked straight up to Jay and pulled the trigger. The slayers even bragged afterward, with one saying that if Jay was still alive, he'd shoot him again. In the end, those guilty verdicts weren't just about closing some dusty cold case file. They were the long-awaited answer to a question that had haunted hip-hop for 22 years. The truth cut deeper than any rumor. Jam Master Jay's homicide wasn't the fallout of some mythic rap beef. It was the intimate, brutal betrayal of men he knew, trusted, and helped. The iron call against industry politics, who refused to turn his back on 50 Cent even when it was risky, wasn't taken down by outsider. And with that, the story of Jam Master Jay didn't close cleanly, but at last it finally closed fully. Now it's your turn. What do you think about the shocking truth behind Jam Master Jay's homicide? Did the brutal betrayal by people he trusted catch you off guard, or did you always suspect it was deeper than the industry rumors? I need to hear your take in the comments below. And while you're at it, don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this video with everyone who needs to know the real story. I'll catch you on the next one.